Native American history is often misunderstood due to widespread misconceptions. But imagine discovering the real stories hidden beneath these falsehoods, like the diverse cultures, traditions, and lives of Native communities. Have you ever wondered how these lies have obscured the true picture of Native Americans? Are you ready to learn about the untold stories and confront the real history of Native Americans? In today's episode, we've put together 7 lies you've been made to believe about Native Americans. Let's unravel the truth together and explore the authentic narratives that challenge these stereotypes. As you watch this video, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. The notion that North America was mostly empty before Columbus arrived inhabited only by a few scattered tribes of hunter-gatherers is a pervasive misconception that distorts the true history of the continent. This simplistic view negates the rich tapestry of indigenous cultures that thrived across the land long before European contact. Contrary to the notion of a sparsely populated wilderness, historical evidence suggests a vibrant mosaic of Native American civilizations, each with its unique customs, languages, and social structures. When Columbus set foot in the Americas in 1492, an estimated 20 million indigenous people resided in what is now the United States. These diverse communities had developed sophisticated agricultural practices, complex societal structures, and thriving trade networks. The impact of European colonization, however, cannot be understated. Genocide, forced displacement, and the introduction of diseases decimated indigenous populations, leaving lasting scars on Native American communities. The devastating effects of diseases like smallpox, brought unintentionally by European settlers, resulted in an unimaginable loss of lives, fundamentally altering the demographic landscape of North America. Contrary to the belief that the land was empty, historical records reveal a different reality. By the early 1800s, North America was far from uninhabited. As westward expansion gained momentum, the U.S. government engaged in a series of policies that forcibly displaced Native American tribes from their ancestral lands. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, under President Andrew Jackson, epitomized this approach, leading to the tragic trail of tears and the forced relocation of thousands of Native Americans from their homelands. These historical events challenged the misconception of an empty North America awaiting European settlers. Instead, they underscore the resilience and complexity of indigenous civilizations that flourished across the continent for centuries. The displacement of tribes by the American government was not a consequence of empty lands, but a result of policies driven by the desire for territorial expansion and economic gain. In debunking the myth of emptiness, we are compelled to re-examine historical narratives, acknowledging the profound impact of European colonization on Native American populations. Understanding pre-Columbia North America's true history requires recognizing indigenous culture's richness and dispelling the oversimplified notion that the continent was a vast, uninhabited wilderness awaiting discovery. The notion that Native Americans were inherently backward, incapable of farming the land or understanding land as property, reflects a deeply ingrained stereotype that has perpetuated a distorted view of indigenous societies. This misconception oversimplifies the sophisticated agricultural practices and land management systems that existed among Native American communities well before the arrival of European colonizers. Contrary to the belief in inherent backwardness, historical evidence demonstrates the advanced agricultural knowledge possessed by many Native American tribes. Indigenous peoples across the Americas cultivated diverse crops, exhibiting a profound understanding of sustainable farming practices adapted to their specific ecosystem. The Three Sisters agriculture, involving the intercropping of maize, beans, and squash, is a notable example of the complex and efficient agricultural systems developed by Native American communities. Moreover, the idea that Native Americans did not understand land as property dismisses the intricate relationship indigenous societies had with their territories. Far from a lack of understanding, many tribes had well-established communal land ownership and sustainable resource management systems. As understood by European settlers, the concept of private land ownership differed significantly from the communal and sustainable practices of Native American societies. The assertion that Native Americans taught the Pilgrims how to farm is an oversimplification that overlooks the exchange of agricultural knowledge between diverse cultures. While indigenous communities did share agricultural techniques with early European settlers, it is important to recognize that this exchange was reciprocal, with both groups adapting and learning from each other. The claim that Native Americans were too backward to farm or manage land collapses when considering the profound impact of European colonization. The forced displacement of Native American tribes, the encroachment on their lands, and the disruption of established agricultural systems were consequences of colonization, not reflections of any inherent shortcoming. Economic factors, such as the pursuit of the fur trade and the enslavement of indigenous peoples, reshaped priorities and led to a shift away from traditional farming practices. In debunking this misconception, it is crucial to dismantle the stereotype of Native Americans as inherently backward. Instead, we should appreciate the complexity and sophistication of their agricultural practices, acknowledging the impact of colonization on disrupting these systems. Understanding the rich history of Native American societies requires recognizing their contributions to sustainable agriculture and dispelling the unfounded notion of inherent backwardness. The assertion that Native Americans were inherently incapable of adapting to civilized society perpetuates a harmful stereotype that oversimplifies the complex history of indigenous people. This misconception not only disregards the rich diversity of Native American cultures, also ignores the significant impact of European colonization and systemic racism on their ability to thrive in what was considered civilized society. Historically, Native American societies were characterized by resilience, adaptability, and the ability to navigate diverse environments. The belief that they were inherently resistant to change neglects the myriad ways in which indigenous communities adapted to their surroundings over centuries. From sophisticated agricultural practices to intricate social structures, Native Americans demonstrated a capacity for innovation and adjustment. The claim that white racism was the main reason for Native American struggles in civilized society is grounded in historical realities. The systematic oppression and discrimination faced by Native Americans, both legally and socially, have had profound and lasting effects. Denial of full citizenship rights, a lack of representation, and biased legal systems created an environment where Native Americans were vulnerable to exploitation and marginalization. One of the key factors contributing to the challenges faced by Native Americans was the denial of full rights as citizens. This denial not only limited their political participation, but also made it easier for the dominant white society to manipulate legal systems against them. The exploitation of legal loopholes, unfair court decisions, and the unjust seizure of Native American lands became widespread, further exacerbating their struggle. The use of derogatory terms like shiftless to describe Native Americans reflects the deeply rooted racism that permeated the narrative surrounding indigenous people. Such stereotypes perpetuated harmful biases reinforcing negative perceptions and justifying discriminatory practices. Furthermore, the assertion that whites could simply kill Native Americans outright when it suited them highlights the violent and genocidal aspects of European colonization. The forced removal of Native Americans from their ancestral lands, such as the Trail of Tears and incidents like the Sand Creek Massacre and Wounded Knee, are tragic examples of the extreme violence perpetrated against indigenous communities. Debunking this misconception requires acknowledging the systemic racism and historical injustices that Native Americans faced. It is essential to recognize indigenous cultures' resilience and adaptability, and contextualize their struggles within the broader framework of colonial history. By understanding the impact of discriminatory policies, denial of citizenship rights, and the violence inflicted upon Native American communities, we can challenge the unfounded notion of inherent incapability and work towards a more accurate and empathetic understanding of their historical experiences. The widely held belief that Christopher Columbus landed in what would become the United States perpetuates a common misconception about the explorer's voyages. The often repeated rhyme, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and the portrayal of Columbus discovering Native Americans in America during elementary school plays contribute to this historical oversimplification. In reality, Columbus never set foot on the soil of the land that would later become the United States. His explorations led him to the Caribbean. The Spanish crown sponsored Christopher Columbus' historic journey across the Atlantic Ocean in 1492. On October 12, 1492, Columbus arrived at an island in the present-day Bahamas named San Salvador. Subsequent voyages took him to other Caribbean islands, including Cuba and Hispaniola. The explorer's encounters were primarily with the indigenous peoples of these Caribbean islands, not the Native American populations found on the North American mainland. To debunk the misconception that Columbus landed in what is now the United States, it is essential to emphasize the geographical distinction between the Caribbean and North America. The Caribbean islands are situated southeast of the continental United States, and Columbus's expeditions focused on these tropical lands rather than the North American mainland. The impact of Columbus's voyages, however, extends beyond the Caribbean. His journeys opened the door to subsequent European exploration and colonization, eventually reaching North America's shores. While Columbus did not reach the mainland, his expeditions paved the way for future explorers, including John Cabot and others who would explore the eastern coast of North America. By contextualizing Columbus's voyages within the broader history of European exploration, students and the general public can better understand the explorer's contributions and the regions he visited. Shifting the narrative away from Columbus as the discoverer of America towards recognizing his impact on global exploration and the consequences of European contact allows for a more informed perspective on this chapter in history. The commonly held narrative surrounding the first Thanksgiving often oversimplifies and romanticizes the historical events that transpired between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag Indians in 1621. While it is true that a shared meal took place, the context and subsequent events challenge the idealized portrayal of a harmonious gathering. However, clarifying certain inaccuracies in the presented statement is crucial to ensure a detailed understanding. The assertion that Thanksgiving was named after a tribe's massacre is inaccurate. Thanksgiving, as a national holiday in the United States, was officially established much later, in 1863, by President Abraham Lincoln. The historical events of 1621 between the Pilgrims and Wampanoag were not directly linked to the establishment of the holiday. The account of the 1621 celebration does acknowledge the presence of Wampanoag Indians who investigated gun and cannon fire, leading to a shared meal between Pilgrims and Wampanoag. However, characterizing the Wampanoag participants as all male warriors oversimplifies the diversity within the indigenous group and perpetuates a stereotype. The interaction was indeed a gesture of peace and a celebration of a successful harvest, but it did not become an annual tradition. The statement then jumps to an unrelated incident in 1636 involving the Pequot Indians, creating a misleading connection between the first Thanksgiving and subsequent violent events. The Pequot War was a complex conflict driven by various factors, including territorial disputes and cultural misunderstandings rather than a direct consequence of the 1621 gathering. While it is true that the Pequot War led to a violent incident in 1636, the claim that Governor William Bradford applauded the massacre and established Thanksgiving as an annual celebration to commemorate the victory is misleading. Thanksgiving as a national holiday was not established until the 19th century, and the events of the Pequot War were not the primary inspiration for its creation. The claim that President Abraham Lincoln ordered the largest mass execution in U.S. history in 1862, involving the hanging of 38 Dakota men, requires a careful examination of historical accuracy. While certain elements of this statement are accurate, important details and historical context must be considered to provide a comprehensive understanding of the events surrounding the Dakota War of 1862. In the fall of 1862, tensions between native tribes in Minnesota and white settlers escalated into what is known as the Dakota War. Native communities, particularly the Dakota Sioux, faced severe hardships, including starvation, mistreatment, and broken promises from the U.S. government. Frustrations reached a breaking point, leading to violence and conflict. After the conflict, more than 300 Dakota men were taken into custody. The subsequent legal proceedings resulted in military trials, during which many Dakota individuals faced charges related to their involvement in the conflict. President Abraham Lincoln, dealing with the pressing issues of the Civil War, approved the findings of the military tribunal, which sentenced 303 Dakota men to death. However, it is crucial to note that Lincoln, in his role as president, did not individually order or approve each specific execution. Instead, he delegated the decision-making authority to military officials overseeing the trial. After a careful review of the cases, Lincoln commuted the sentences of many Dakota individuals, finding that not all were guilty of crimes deserving of death. On December 26, 1862, 38 Dakota men were executed by hanging in Mankato, Minnesota. While the number is significant and tragic, it is essential to distinguish the circumstances of these executions from a deliberate act of mass execution ordered by Lincoln. The executions took place in response to the legal processes of the time and were not solely directed by the president. The claim about the bodies being used as medical cadavers is more complex. Historically, the bodies of executed individuals were sometimes used for medical purposes, but the extent to which this occurred varies. It is challenging to provide precise details about the fate of the bodies of the executed Dakota men. As historical records may not be exhaustive or consistent, in debunking this claim, it is important to emphasize the complexities surrounding the Dakota War of 1862, acknowledging the historical injustices faced by Native communities while clarifying the role of President Lincoln in the legal proceedings. Understanding the broader context is crucial to avoid oversimplification and ensure a more accurate portrayal of historical events. Various inaccuracies have indeed influenced the popularized narrative surrounding Pocahontas, often perpetuated by media portrayals and historical misinterpretations. The claim that Pocahontas was about 8 years old when John Smith arrived is historically inaccurate. Pocahontas was likely born around 1596, and John Smith's arrival in Virginia took place in 1607, making her approximately 11 years old at that time. Furthermore, the assertion that Pocahontas married another young Indian warrior contradicts historical evidence. Pocahontas did marry, but her union was with John Rolfe, an English colonist, in 1614. This union was part of efforts to establish peaceful relations between the Native American Powhatan Confederacy and the English settlers in Jamestown. The claim that Pocahontas had a child before marrying John Rolfe is accurate. Pocahontas and John Rolfe had a son named Thomas Rolfe in 1615. However, it's important to note that the child mentioned in the claim, given away before her marriage to Rolfe, is not historically documented. The complexities of Pocahontas' life, including her family relationships and the circumstances surrounding her son, are still subjects of historical speculation. Contrary to the Disney-fueled narrative, which romanticized a relationship between Pocahontas and John Smith, historical records and tribal oral histories indicate that Pocahontas' original native husband was killed. After this tragedy, her newborn child, if one existed, would have been given to relatives. Pocahontas was subsequently taken captive during hostilities between the Powhatan people and the English settlers. The age at which Pocahontas was forced into captivity is specified in the claim as 15 or 16 years old, aligning with historical record. In 1613, Pocahontas was indeed taken captive by the English during hostilities between the Powhatan Confederacy and the Jamestown settlers. During her captivity, Pocahontas was treated with relative respect, and she eventually converted to Christianity, taking the name Rebecca. In conclusion, unraveling historical myths is crucial for a better understanding of our past. Whether it's re-examining Thanksgiving, challenging stereotypes about Native Americans, or debunking tales like Pocahontas, addressing inaccuracies helps us see history more clearly. We uncover the complex truths that shape our collective story by questioning popular narratives. It's a shared responsibility to seek accurate information, honoring the diverse experiences shaping our world. This pursuit respects our history and contributes to a more enlightened and respectful understanding. And with that, we wrap up today's episode. Please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on your notification bell. Thanks for watching, and see you in our next video.